The Street Corner Soapbox. The Street Corner Soapbox with Falso and Willin. Podcast takeover. We're making a killing. Music to nightlife. Debauchery and street news. Serving it hot. We are some street news, movies and mayhem. The craziest guests, words from chaos. Get it off our chest. Rhode Island, worldwide, dark corners in all places. Speak how we live, radio show, smoking aces. Ladies and gents, for the people we're talking. Take the show on the road, right where you're walking. Yeah.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Street Corner Soapbox Podcast coming to you live.
That's right, boys and girls. Street Corner Soapbox. Now, we all know during this crazy time with the pandemic, businesses are struggling. So we're here to support local businesses, and we need your help to do so also.
That's right. So subscribe to our Patreon, become a member to help support the show, and receive exclusive episodes and bonus content, as well as discounts on merch. That's patreon.com/streetcorner_soapbox2020.
Follow us on our website, streetcornersoapbox.com.
That's right, boys and girls. We are back. Street Corner Soapbox. I am here, my brother, Lord Willin.
Hey, how's it going, everybody?
What up?
Not much, man. We got a good
special guest
today.
all the way from New York.
That's right.
Josh Paynter's in the house today.
Josh Paynter, Daoist Priest. Josh Paynter, how's it going?
Hey, fellas. Nice to be here. Thanks a lot.
Yeah,
thanks
man.
for coming on the show,
glad to have you on, man. I know Josh for a little while. We've corresponded over social media. Basically, we have similar interests in music and things like that, and he also happens to be a real deal Daoist priest, and I don't know too many of those, and I've been into Eastern philosophy for quite a while, and he's schooled me on some things, and we've talked back and forth, and I said, hey, I think he'd be a good guest to have on. And Rob here also is into the Eastern philosophy, so this is cool.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. No, this is fun. I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah. So, Josh, before we actually get into your background, can you give the people like a brief history of Taoism? Because a lot of people might not be familiar with it. A lot of people know Buddhism, but Taoism's a little more obscure. So if you could maybe just give a brief rundown of the philosophy and some aspects of it as a religion, etc.
Yeah. Taoism is from China. It's China's native religion. So whereas Buddhism comes from India, I know there's a lot of Buddhism in China. Taoism is actually the native religion of China. It started around 200 A.D. was when our first priest sort of had his revelations from Lord Lao, like Lao Tzu's deified form. Lao Tzu wrote the Tao Te Ching. It's like the Taoist, one of our core texts. And, since that time, Taoism has been an organized religion. And the main features of it are, the quest for, enlightenment, to take the raw material of everyday life, the pain, the suffering, the joy, all of that stuff, and to create, from those ingredients, the soup that yields enlightenment. And so we draw from our experiences, and we examine those things through the lens of Taoist practices and philosophy, and try to make our lives better and, less violent and more compassionate and more enlightened. That's basically it in a nutshell. Other than that, though, there's a very innate religious component too. Our temples are usually on the sides of mountains, and there's things burning and bells ringing and people chanting and all of that stuff. And so there's also that aspect to it. So you can engage Taoism, in that whole spectrum, from the temple life all the way into just you yourself in a room reading a book and meditating, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so personally, my lineage is, it's funny because, most people would be familiar with my clan, my Taoist clan, which is the Wu-Tang clan. I'm a Wudang priest. So.
Very nice. That's very dope.
Yeah.
The Wudang Mountain's actually a real place. For those that don't know, that's where the name came from originally.
Exactly. The Wudang Mountains are named that because our patron deity there of those mountains is called Shen, the Dark Warrior. that temple system is the one which houses essentially the Taoist martial arts, just like Shaolin houses the Buddhist martial arts.
Yep.
And so Wutang or Wudang, is it's how it's pronounced in Chinese officially, is that sort of special mountain complex with lots of temples. Some are very obvious and public, and some are hidden in the cracks and crevices. And in those mountains is where a lot of our ancestors have done a lot of their cultivation and technique and the development of all of their forms, meditation and martial and all of that stuff.
Would you say Taoism is more of a philosophy than a religion, or has it morphed into a religion?
That's like one of the age-old questions, and that's something that we contend with students and everything. And the reality is that it's both. Honestly, philosophically, Taoism is one of those ways that humanity has tried to make sense out of the chaos of this world. Man, shit is crazy.
Fair enough.
And yeah, and as humans, we need systems for making sense of it all. And so philosophically, Taoism is just that. It's a system of making sense out of this insanity.
Yeah,
that's
on the other hand, yeah,
more now than ever. Fine.
Yeah, more now than ever.
Yeah, and it's available to everybody. These systems are available to everybody. On the other hand, there's the religious component, which is, just like the Catholic Church, you don't get to say you're a Catholic unless you've been baptized, unless you've had communion. But, you don't get to go up and take communion unless you've done the appropriate sacraments for that. You know what I mean? And so in that sense, there's also this religious component that I go to China every year, and I've been going to China since 1989. And that is like, how I've come into that community and been accepted and been ordained and gone through all of the ritual activities that are involved in all of that. But it's not exclusive, man. It's not like that's some special, badge that I wear. It's just that in the religious context, that's my identity. But anyone can pick up the Tao Te Ching, read that, and ponder it, and get down.
Yeah, it gives you definitely can give you philosophies and inspirations for everyday life. I have one Tao version that I use is it's like the 360 or whatever, and it goes by the date. So you just look at the back, whatever the day's date is, and pick it up, and it takes you to the page, and there's a thing you read and everything, and it's good.
Yeah. That one's by Dong Ming Dao. That's a good one. Yeah, that one has like a lot of like helpful. And that comes from the tradition at large too. So there's a lot of good stuff in that one for like daily inspiration. And it's nice to keep something like that in your pocket. Something small every day that you can, rather than trying to attack the whole system at once.
Yeah.
One little, take one moment every day from one of these texts of Tao Te Ching or this book that you have, 365 Tao, and just carry that around in your pocket all day like a precept, like a promise to sort of keep.
Yeah, and it's easy to maintain that too. It's already on you one a day, and then out of the year, then you've learned the whole system in broad, and then you can follow up with something else or have your read.
Exactly. Yeah, and it gives you the opportunity to really let it stew too. It's like one thing to read something, be like, oh shit, that's intense. That's profound, but then walk away from it because you're too confused because you now read 60 pages of stuff. Like, But you read one good thing, and it's like you can carry it like a little song in your head all day.
You probably retain more better to the everyday aspect of life too.
Yeah,
it's fresh on your mind every morning you wake up, wherever afternoon when you wake up, and read that, and then you're on your way. And
you could ponder on that one, parable or whatever you want to call it. And
exactly, and it's amazing. What's crazy about that is like you think, this one here, where is this going to show up? Would it even matter? And then all through the day, you realize, oh, wow, this is a good opportunity to view this situation with this friend or this girlfriend or this boss or whatever. All those things now you're starting to look through that lens that you established in the morning, Mm-hmm. So every day you polish that lens and you go out in the world with those glasses on. All of a sudden you're like, oh, shit, this is really changing the way I see things,
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah.
So let's get into your background now. That was a good introduction to Taoism, but let's get into your background, your introduction to Chinese culture through your grandmother's paintings and your early days.
Let me tell you something. So let me tell you like this. I talk to a lot of people. I do a lot of podcasts and stuff. But every time people ask me that question, I have to start with my grandma, because that's what they expect to hear is this, the sterilized version. But with you guys, I get to tell you the real story.
Yeah, for sure.
It goes like this. So yes, my grandmother was a famous painter in the Chinese style. In my childhood, that was, I was clearly exposed to all of that, but this is where it really happened. As you may know, a lot of, especially when I was young, so in the 80s, like this would be like 86 through into the 90s. Every Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I was at some shithole somewhere in some neighborhood, sitting on the stoop in between bands playing, philosophizing with my boys. You know what I mean?
No doubt.
And that is really, it was those conversations, outside of CBGBs or outside of the pipeline in Newark, New Jersey, or, wherever it may have been. That was like where I really fell in love with the idea of like talking about ideas, like it's one thing to talk to small talk to, just to talk shit about whatever, but it's another when like, and let me tell you something, some of the greatest philosophers were sitting on the stoop outside of a club in the New York hardcore scene.
I know. I agree with you 1,000,000%.
Yeah. So I'm talking about Scotty Banks. I'm talking about Cheer. I'm talking about all those old cats who really, these guys are fucking geniuses.
No doubt.
And so when you come out of some place and you've got blood coming off your head from someone's shoe, who knows what happened inside those places. But you're covered in sweat, and next thing you know, you're talking about the meaning of life, man. The traffic lights are changing. I can have all these images of like sitting there in the cold, like a little sweaty, a little cold, and just like not wanting to leave that stoop because someone is saying something that's actually changing my mind. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so out there on the street, a lot of the conversations at that time in the 80s were really revolving around, in terms of the philosophies coming out of the East, a lot of those cats in New York were talking about Hare Krishna.
You're right.
So that, interestingly, that wasn't my thing. They were giving out free books, so I took some books, you know what I mean? And I read some of those books, the Bhagavad Gita or whatever, and they were really interesting to me, but they really weren't like, there was something also about the community. But it got me interested in an alternative philosophy because, I come from my mother's family. They're Bronx Jews from the Arthur Ave area. So they were just straight gangsters too. And so I came from this really like, Bronx Judeo-Christian, background in terms of my religious philosophy. My mother used to say every night before I went to bed, if anybody tries to hurt you, I'm going to kill them with my bare hand. That was, and then she'd say something like, "Thank you, God." So it was like a really, it was definitely this eye for an eye kind of like guardianship. God is like, he's our shield and sword. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I felt like, well, what about these other views? You know what I mean? And it was there in New York, in Newark, that I got to meet all of these people who, for one reason or another, I don't know if it was me or them, but the philosophizing was really essential to me. And that really led me into the whole arena of this type of contemplative way of looking at things. Like there's more to life than meets the eye. And I just wanted to know what was down in there. And I got a copy of the Tao Te Ching. I don't remember where I got it. And I read that and I was like, this is what I want to do, And so my grandmother at the time, my uncle was working in Singapore. He was doing some kind of salesman or something. And my grandmother, she was worried about me because I was tattooed and, and she thought, oh, this kid needs civilizing. He needs to get out of his little town because I grew up in a broke down factory town. She just wanted me to see a little more of the world. So my uncle was over there in Asia. So she sent me to him one summer. This was 1990. And I went to these temples just as sort of like a tourist thing. And I was looking at it and I was thinking, I'm going to come back here one day. And when I do, I'm going to know what's happening and I'm going to speak the language.
Yeah.
So that put a fire in me going there. That was, I had been, I was a shitty student and I was just going to do what my dad did. I was going to get a truck and do construction. That was just the plan. And this really changed my mind to get my shit together. And I went to college. And in college, all I wanted to do was learn Chinese. Like that was my college was essentially like a Votech school. I went there with a plan. I wanted to learn this language so I could like open that world, because the world was kind of, that world is closed. You go to Chinatown, if you speak Chinese, there's two layers to Chinatown. There's the obvious, and then there's the underneath, and the language is the key to that door.
Right. Yeah.
And it was the same thing with all these books and everything else. It was like that was what really opened it up for me. And, so since then, that's just been my whole path is just continuing to like engage that, study it, and save up money to go back, and come here and save up money to go back. And, that's the story.
I think Chinese culture tends to be pretty secretive. I just know that based on martial arts. And but did you so you basically got a window into it through your grandmother's paintings?
Yeah, definitely. That was like from my earliest ages. She was in China in the 80s when it was still pretty much closed off. Like not the Iron Curtain, whatever they call it, the Chinese version. It was just, and this grandmother was like magical, and I really wanted to know like what made her tick. And China seemed to be the place that she and I really converged. That was how I could have conversations with her. Was in that arena, because it's hard somehow. For me, it was kind of hard to talk to my grandparents. They were from a totally different
Yeah.
But that allowed us a conversation, and I think part of it was just the specialness of being able to talk to my grandmother. That really was another thing. Like I wanted to make her proud, in a way. So that was also helpful to sort of have this. That was another fire underneath me. Was like, do the right thing for her. Let her know that everything worked out okay.
Yeah, you guys connected on, through your interest, your growing interest in that culture, and then her already being involved with it.
Yeah. And so what I do now is, I'm an acupuncturist, and I do Chinese calligraphy. Those are my two sort of like jobs, and I have a Daoist temple that I teach online. My brother, my Daoist brother, and I, we have about 65 students that we teach every single week, and we take them to China and all that stuff.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Now, you got into martial arts, and you were doing martial art movies as a kid. Was that before or after your trip to China with your grandmother?
So martial arts is like, for me, so I grew up, when I was in fourth grade, I started wrestling.
Yeah.
And I wrestled all the way up into high school. Then when I went to college, I studied, I did some Aikido and some other things. And when I went to China, I got introduced to Kung Fu, Gong Fu, or Wushu. And I learned a few Tai Chi forms and a whole bunch of Qigong forms. Then I came back here, and I suppose that I'm a little bit dyslexic, and so those forms are really difficult for me to learn. And the tactile nature of wrestling, which is was much easier for me because there's another person involved.
Yeah.
And so this was the year. Interestingly enough, this was the year that UFC then happened, and I saw that shit, and I was like, oh. I get this. Like, I understand. I want to do this. And so there was a guy teaching. His name is Dave Aldiz. He's an amazing Brazilian jiu-jitsu instructor. He was the first non-Gracie, the first one without that last name, literally.
Oh, shit.
Oh, really? Wow.
To become a black belt. And so I found him in like 90. I studied with him in like 95. So So that was 25 years ago. And he had no place to teach, so he would drive an hour and a half, and me and two of my friends we rented out. We paid like a small fee to some gymnastics studio, and he would come up and we would train in this gymnastics place. So we'd sit there and we'd wait for all these like 6-year-old girls to leave with their moms and dads and everything, and then we would train there. That was before he even had a school or anything. Now he's like a big shot. You know, he's Mickey Gall's teacher. I don't know if you know who Mickey Gall is.
Sounds familiar.
UFC yeah. So, you know, that was my extension of my wrestling history. Was that kind of engagement. So back then, in those days, we were still trying to make a name, so he wanted us to help him sort of claim space. So we used to go to every fucking taekwondo school, judo school, whatever, and challenge the teachers. Like just walk in the door and challenge the teacher. They'd bring a video camera and we'd fight the teacher. But it was crazy because it was back then. Nobody knew who unless they had seen the UFC. And by the way, back then nobody had. I mean, it was like, what is this? What are you talking about? And in New Jersey, of course, there were warehouse fights. There were definitely like there was an underground bare knuckle scene, but in terms of like having a school, making money with a system of belts, etc., people needed to make their reputation. So we tried to make its reputation in that way. Like back then, it was just literally barnstorming, going school to school, challenging teachers, all the way up to Massachusetts, New Jersey, whatever. We were just going door to door.
Oh, so you weren't? Actually, I didn't realize that you were around for what they call the dark days of MMA. So you were training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu before people, at least on the East Coast, really knew what it was.
Yeah. So Dave was here, and Hickson was in California. Was it?
Yeah. It was big in California.
Yeah, Henzo had a school in New York. Henzo was in New York though, but that was it though. It was Hickson on the West Coast, Henzo here, but they were both races.
Yeah, right.
And Dave was the other guy. So back then, our team was called the Hickson-Hoyler competition team. So that was what we were called. So I used to wear shirts that said, Hickson-Hoyler, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu competition team. I mean, it sounds unbelievable. It was such a joke because there were three of us. But it was fun to I have those shirts, man. It's crazy. They were screen printed in some alley. I have no idea, but it was it was cool though to be involved in that back then was really interesting.
I bet.
I'm not saying I know anything about it anymore. I mean, the scene is so crazy right now, and there's so many good fighters and all that stuff. And I'm kind of old too, but it was good to be there at that time. And I'll tell you what, man. Back then, having that martial art, especially with a lifelong history of wrestling.
Yeah.
I mean, I felt invincible, man, because people they were still really unaware of what to do if somebody grabbed onto you and pulled you onto the ground. I mean, at that point, everyone was like fighting a kid. Right. It was crazy.
That's how Hoist Gracie was winning, and people didn't know what to do. No,
yeah, he triangling people. I mean, the things that he used to submit people with, I mean, in the way that he did, I mean, people still triangle. But, back then, you would watch it happen and you'd think, they're doing it to themselves. What is going on? They don't know what they're getting into. I mean, it was crazy to watch that stuff back then. It was just like, people were completely unaware. It was really awe-inspiring to see, the command that form had over all other forms. Before people got really good at boxing and stuff. I'm a huge fan of boxing. I mean, that's my thing. I'm Ukrainian, so I love Lomachenko and Usyk and those cats. They're my jam. Those guys are unreal.
Are you still training BJJ now?
No, not anymore. I don't. I'm in upstate New York, and I'm spoiled. I need a good school. I know there's some good people up here. I hope people aren't listening to this. They're knocking on my door. But I just really need I would need a guys my age who aren't going to try to break my elbow.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because these young kids, when they come in the door, they the way they fight is a little strange. Like they're trying to hurt each other in a way. I don't understand that, but
Yeah, I mean, I think if you find people that are on that same wavelength as you, you could still definitely actively train.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. It's like I'm in it right now. I would be in it for I don't know, man. Just the flow of that when you really roll versus like when you're in a contentious battle with someone that's all stiff and weird. Like when you really roll, it's like playing chess. You can feel their intention before they do it. You're already countering before they're committed, and vice versa.
Yep.
And so the whole thing is like this really sophisticated, dance. It's unbelievable. And then eventually someone is, blacking out or tapping out. It's amazing that it ends that way because it feels so natural until all of a sudden someone's move falls short of what they needed to put in play and they lose. It's done,
Yeah, no, definitely.
It's really I think it's such an amazing thing to listen. In a lot of the other forms where the predominance of the form is based on strength in somebody, it's kind of hard to do that with a partner. You know what I mean? You could put on pads and gear and stuff, but it's like it's not the same. But with the jiu-jitsu, you can completely commit to the form as if it was a real thing, And what stops it is someone tapping versus like you hurting them, and that's it. Up until that last move that ends it all, everything else was real, and that's what I really appreciate about it.
Yeah, it's about technique and leverage. It's really not about size. I mean, all the guys that I've trained with in jiu-jitsu, most of them are smaller than me, but they're much better, and it doesn't matter how much bigger I am than them. Once we get on the ground, I can't do anything.
Yeah, no, it's really amazing. It's such an equalizer. It's a strange thing. That's one of the things that our teacher used to do too. Like I'm small, by the way. And if somebody came in, like these big dudes would come in, like, what are you guys doing in here? And state champ wrestlers or whatever, big guys. And my teacher would say, we're doing jiu-jitsu. You want to train? And they would be like, yeah, sure, whatever, but with an attitude, And then he'd stick that with little me. And I would command these huge guys, and they would be like so frustrated and pissed off. Like they would sign up before we were even done because they wanted to know what the hell this little guy was doing.
I think that was a lot of people, especially when they started watching UFC. They saw what the Gracies were doing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So let's go back a little bit too. So you were supposed to go to China originally in 1988, but then there was the Tiananmen Square protest, so you had to hold off on that, and you ended up going in 1990 for the first time.
Yeah, exactly. I remember watching Tiananmen on the TV, thinking like, "Oh no, they're going to kill everybody," And I think they pretty much did. I think when it's all said and done, historically, there was a massacre.
Yeah.
We'll never know. We'll never know how bad it really was. But that was a really terrible event. So I couldn't go then. And when I did go in 90, it was, the border was nuts. The border crossing was crazy. I grew up, watching, Red Dawn and stuff. And, the communist threat, Leviathan was like a real deal for us. And getting to a communist border in 1990, the year after one of the biggest, protests for democracy, it was unbelievable. It was everything you'd think it would be, like the gun aimed right in his face, too. Like, it wasn't like, an angry-looking passport clerk. It was like multiple, I don't know what the Chinese, I guess they must have been AKs, but they were just like, you were surrounded, man, and they were searching and pulling the camera apart. It was crazy. But I went in, I got in, and it was a very controlled environment. Back then, you had to have a handler. So there'd be the tour guide, and then like this weird government watcher to make sure that the tour guide didn't say anything uncomely. I mean, it was crazy. So it wasn't like the most open experience, but it was definitely, I was there, I was seeing cool things, and I knew that I had to go back. And when I went back there as enrolled in college in the United Province, city called I had the right papers to be essentially viewed, not as a full citizen, but like as partial. So I could go where I wanted to go, and I could eat where I wanted to eat, which for other foreigners there at that time, they were only allowed to eat and stay at certain places. They couldn't, there were two prices for everything. There's the foreigner price and then the native price. So the whole world in China at that time was split into two things. You couldn't go shopping except for at these places that were set up for foreigners to go shopping. And so the whole thing was really wild. But I had this sort of magic. I had this sort of like golden ticket, so like a passport to go where I wanted to go. So that second time when I was in college, it was really rich experience because I could, do the things I wanted to do and see more what I wanted to see. Talk to people. I didn't have a handle on all that.
Okay, so in 1991, you attended Bard College, and you were a philosophy major with a minor in Asian art history. Tell us about that experience a bit.
So that was, it's funny. When I got back from China, the day I got back, I went to a party at a friend's house. And it's funny, Loki was there. You know Loki.
Yeah, of course. My brother Loki. What's up?
Yeah. Loki was there. I'll never forget, man. Loki came in, and I remember someone saying, like, oh, shit, Loki's on the lam again, or something like that. I don't think but there was this girl, more important than Loki. Loki, I love you, but this girl really caught my eye. And I was like, whoa, this girl was smart, man. She was really interesting. And someone said, oh, she goes to Bard College. And I had applied to Bard. I got in, but there was that I wasn't really sure if I was going to go there. But then I realized, like, now I have to. This person was like really interesting. So I went to Bard, and I was kind of like out of place there, really out of place. I think I almost got kicked out my first day because almost got in a fight with a couple guys. It was like that. I really was like, I didn't belong there for real. And I had to learn how to be there. You know what I mean? Not academically. I could handle that. Yeah. I had to learn how to be there as a human being. And so it was tough, but I was really there to study basically what my grandmother did, Chinese art. So I realized that you can't study Chinese art early on. As soon as I started with the classes, they were mentioning references to religion and history. I didn't know when they were taught. I didn't know when the Tang Dynasty was. I didn't know, So I realized, oh shit, in order to do this, I really need to take some history courses. So I signed up quick for some Chinese history courses the next semester to sort of round me out. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I got this. And then they started talking, and I was like, oh shit, I think I actually need to learn this language. So my second year, first semester, I was like all in on the Chinese language. And then so I was all intensive Chinese languages. And then I realized every time I come out of class, I'm speaking English again. I think I have to go to college in China.
Okay.
And so I needed 24 hours a day of Chinese. And I needed to go to a place in China. So back then, a lot of students were going to Beijing, to Beida, the University of Beijing Dashui, the Beijing University. And I thought, if I go there, I know what's going to happen. There's going to be kids my age from all over the world. It's going to be me, thinking about girls and thinking about the nightlife stuff of the whole town. I'm not going to get shit done. So I went to this crazy corner of China back then to do this so that I could really be immersed. And I was really glad that I did, because where I was there were a lot of Taoist temples there. There was no opportunity to speak English other than with the 4 other English speakers in my dorm. And so it was...
You got to force yourself to do it.
Yeah, you really could become engrossed in the whole culture.
Well, it's good you made that move, too. You knew you were going to get distracted going somewhere else, too. Right. So that was probably very smart on your part.
Yeah.
Was that the Yunnan University in China?
Yunnan?
Yeah.
You say it?
All right. Exactly. Yep. So Yunnan University was really cool. You know, it was that city back then there were no buildings over one story tall. I mean, it was really traditional. Everything had courtyards. The streets weren't wide enough for cars. Everybody it was all donkeys and bicycles. I'm telling you, I saw maybe 4 cars in 1994.
Wow.
I didn't see it. Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was crazy. And I would sit at a restaurant and they would pull up with the donkey and then tie it to the inside of a wheelbarrow and butcher it right there in front of me. It was crazy. Like, just kill the donkey. I mean, like, I was eating pigeons and brains. I was out there, like, fully immersed. Yeah, like, it was amazing because I really it, like, shocked me out of my, out of my
zone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that sounds like a big culture shock. No question about it.
Yeah. It was a shock in so many ways, linguistically, culturally. I don't know, and also, I definitely had to keep my cool because it was, it was still, there were curfews, and if you were caught out at night, or even if you were caught talking to a Chinese girl alone, you were in serious trouble.
Really?
So yeah. So I was, in a lot of ways, it was like it really forced me to like. I'm here to study. I'm here to learn. I'm here to, to abide by these rules of this culture. And it was really like, it was transformative in that way because it made me do things I wasn't really planning on doing. You know what I mean? So it was good that way. Intense.
How did you find being a Westerner in China? Now, did you have a lot of difficulties? I mean, China's obviously politically a lot different than how we are here.
Yeah. It was, interestingly, it was easy for me. It was not easy for them. Or I don't know if it was difficult for them, but it was certainly, let me put it like this. Okay. When I would leave my room, I'd hit the street. As soon as my feet touched the pavement, I'd have people following me. And the more I walked, the more it would sort of like conglomerate. Like it was, one time I was walking down the block and it was like a zombie movie. All these people just following me, just watching what I did, what I ate, what I bought, what I looked at, who I talked to. They were just fascinated. And one time I was out a little further west in an even more rural area. And and by the way, my Chinese was really good at the time, especially then. My accent was pretty localized. I was using a lot of the local lingo and the dialect of that locality. Mm-hmm. And so I remember one conversation I was having, the person stopped me and they were like, "What province are you from? Like, what part of China are you from? Because you don't look like us." And it was really the whole thing there was really fascinating then because, don't forget, there was no internet then, no cell phones, the TV then was very limited. It was still very protected there. So they weren't like getting a lot of Westerners, especially in that region there.
Yeah.
So I was a real curiosity for them, much more so than they were for me. Cause I felt like, this is their place, and I'm here to study. And I was enamored with the whole culture and language and everything. But so I was sort of like in that romantic phase with them. But for them, I was like this weird, thing that would. I was tattooed too, so they
were
fucking
like mesmerized.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, they didn't know what to do. Yeah, they didn't know what to do with it. But it was really great. That experience was.
And you had tattoos, you said.
Yeah.
So even out there, that's totally different culture too.
I mean, I don't know if it's similar to Japan, but in Japan, the only people that have tattoos, at least for a long time, were criminals. Is it the same in China?
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, so they must have been looking at you like, who the hell is this white dude with tattoos? No
doubt. They
and you speak fully.
Sure.
Yeah. Localized.
Yeah, so that was definitely, that they were mystified. Like, oh, what's going on? Yeah. I definitely presented an interesting object for them to ponder, no doubt. Yeah.
How did you find trying to communicate with your family back home while you were in China? Was it difficult?
It was airmail. I used to write letters on this weird lightweight paper. That's it.
Really? No phone calls?
No. It would take 10 days to get there, and then their response would take 10 days to get back. So there was one phone on the block, and so I could book some time. And I could try to call them. Most of the time it didn't work. Once my mother called me, I remember. And so someone came running up, your mother's on the phone, and or someone's on the phone. They're saying, I had made my mother memorize a phrase in Chinese. I told her my Chinese name and my room number in the dorm. That's all I told her. So she would say, Pei Hong Long Saling, like Rainbow Dragon in room 405.
That's great.
Yeah, that was my first Chinese name that a teacher had given me. But my name is now totally different. But Rainbow Dragon is a little funny. But that she used, because it's my teacher named me that because of the tattoos, actually.
Okay.
Yeah. I got one call from my mom. And the rest of the time was crazy airmail. Do you even remember airmail? I mean, it was nuts. That paper was like tissue paper. It was crazy.
Yeah, that is pretty crazy. Almost unimaginable by today's standards.
No, really. I mean, it is unimaginable. I have my grandma saved the letters I wrote to her. She's passed away, but I had in a box all these letters, and I looked at them and I was like, "This is when I don't even know if my kids know what a stamp is."
I think you might be right, man. I was saying not too long ago, like the last time I think I wrote a letter was to someone in prison.
Right. Last time I wrote a letter, I was in prison.
For real. No, really, the last letter I got was from my dad from prison.
Okay.
10 years ago. Yeah, definitely. I was like, oh, shit, I have to write letters now?
Right?
Yeah.
So after you graduated and you came back from China, you were diagnosed with cancer?
Yeah.
And and then after you received treatment for that, after you got better, that motivated you to get into Chinese medicine?
Yeah, so when I got back from China, I was a little screwed up. I felt weird, and I thought, oh, it must be a parasite, because that's what everyone
fucking eating pigeons.
Yeah, exactly. No, I thought for sure. I ate pigeons and donkeys. How am I supposed to feel?
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean? There's no way I'm going to feel. There's no way I'm going to feel good. But I had this little swollen thing in my neck, and it got worse and worse and worse. And I finally went to a doctor in Philadelphia. He was like, "Oh man, you have cancer, and we need to biopsy it." And then they did the biopsy. I went to when I woke up from the biopsy, my girlfriend at the time was there. She's now my wife. We've been together since 91.
Nice.
Yeah. She was like, "Oh, you have cancer." So then I went to the doctors. We're talking treatment, and then I was like, "I don't know. I need some time to think. This is crazy." You know what I mean? And then the doctor looked at me and she said, "You have 3 months to live.
What?
Make up your mind."
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
God.
What type of cancer?
I had a lymphoma.
Oh, man. That's
Yeah. So that was really transformative. I mean, of all of these other things, this was like, holy shit, you hear that? It's
it changes things, makes it real.
Yeah. And what were you, 20-something years old at the time?
Yeah, 22.
Jeez. Wow. That's insane.
And everybody knows, we know we're going to die. Everybody, that's
right.
But when someone looks you in the face and they're like, by the end of the summer, you're gone. That was something like really profound. And so I went through the treatments and all that stuff. And through the course of that, man, they wrecked me. That chemo and the radiation just completely trashed me.
Yeah, that's right.
And that was impetus for me to sort of examine, like, all right, well, I've been broken down to I was yellow, bald, no eyebrows, no nothing. Believe me, like weird. And I'm just like black eyes and skinny and really fucked up. Before that, I had like a huge wrestler neck, everything. I just, and this thing took me down to the ground, like totally knocked me out.
Oh, shit.
And so I was looking for like some way to build myself back up. Not just like exercise and diet, not that bullshit. I'm talking like build me up from the essence. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I found Chinese medicine, and I was like, oh, this is something I could do. I speak Chinese. I read it. I've been studying all this stuff. I mean, I have access to this stuff in a way that would be really interesting, And so
and you learn everything else.
Yeah. So that's what brought me to Chinese medicine school, and I did that. So I that's 5 years of education after the undergrad work. So that was, I think I was 27 when I graduated from that. And then I was hired right out the door by a medical school. They were opening up a Chinese medicine department in New York. And so I got hired to be a professor right out of school. So it was because I spoke Chinese and everything. And so I practiced and taught Chinese medicine since then, since 2000 I've been practicing.
Well, let me say this. The doctors were obviously wrong because you obviously beat the cancer. And do you think now, were you also being treated with Chinese medicine when you were sick?
Yes.
All right.
And do you think that's what maybe cured you of it?
Man, I would love to know the answer to that. I would love to know why it worked out. And
probably made the rehabilitation better.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it together. My family, my mother, my girlfriend. I think those things were all part of it. I was supported really well. I wasn't on my own. What am I going to eat today? I guess I'll, pop this in the microwave.
That's a big part of it, man. Your support system.
The mental attitude too that you develop, right? They say a lot of people actually
they give
overcome illness when they have a positive mindset.
Yeah. No, for sure. I had good friends. I had my family, and I stayed active. I would hike 11 miles a day sometimes, even in my worst. So it was I just kept on going outside and walking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
that definitely helped.
After you went to school of Chinese medicine, you did that for 5 years,
and
then you started studying Taoism.
I'd studied Taoism from 91 in college all along. Taoism has been my constant, underneath all of it was that study. Yeah.
And then you ended up becoming the 25th Generation Priest.
Yeah. So that was my temple. One of my temples, not the Wudong area, but one of my temples is the oldest. Is the mountain where Taoism originated. My temple is on the spot where Taoism was, first initiated, and it's this really ancient temple system. Now, we're talking 200 A.D. So that's Rome. Rome was in full swing.
Yeah.
When this place was, in full swing, and it's still there, which is crazy. And so deep in those mountains, that was where my ritual, my ceremony was really awesome and special.
That must have been a pretty intense experience.
Yeah. What's funny about that temple system, my kids love this, that temple where I was ordained is where they did all the photos and filming to develop the Kung Fu Panda background.
Interesting twist.
Yeah. When my kids were little, I was like, yeah, Daddy's going to where Kung Fu Panda was. That's where I'm going to go and get ordained. That's my temple. Yeah.
Now, how long in total did it take you to become the 25th Generation Priest? How long did you study for?
So for me, it was, about 20 years. But it's really my students now that I take over there to get ordained. They're because they have me and my brother Jack, because we've developed this. We're now official. I had to go the long way, but now I can make it so that they only have to study for 3 years with me before they can be ordained.
Oh, really?
Because that's the traditional model. About, as they say, it's 1,000 days, but it's actually obviously a little more than 1,000. But you should be trained for 1,000 days before you're welcomed into the community. So that's how we do it. So we take people through a 3-year bit of training, and then they can come over there and they go through the process as well.
So basically, you were teaching Chinese medicine and then studying to become a priest, a Taoist priest. Yeah,
simultaneously. They're both really there's a lot of crossover between those two things, and they have a lot to do with each other. Yeah, so there's it's not hard to do both at once. It's actually easier to do both.
Yeah, those worlds are different.
Yeah, they totally do. Yeah.
And then you said this earlier, but you also studied acupuncture and herbology. at the same time, which is part of Chinese medicine, right?
Yeah, that's, when we say Chinese medicine, right? Yeah, when we say Chinese medicine, we use that term because it includes all of those things: acupuncture, herbs, all of the various other techniques like cupping and whatever. All of those things are inside the parameters of Chinese medicine.
I got to tell you, I've had some acupuncture done, and it definitely helps. 100%.
Yeah,
I think it's a great way to.
Yeah, you told me. My grandmother said that too.
It definitely helps with pain. You got to do it consistently, but you kind of like build up. The I don't know the term, but
what do you do, once a week?
I mean, at least once a week, right? Right, Josh? You think?
Yeah. It depends on the condition. Sometimes with some people, I don't need to see them that often. Other times, I need to see them once or twice a week, depending on what's going on and if there was an injury or an accident, like how. I need to see them in the beginning of that injury and then not so much later. It's in the acute phase for some things, in the chronic for others. So, it all depends on the condition, for sure.
Now, were you also studying Tai Chi and Qigong at the same time?
Yeah.
And how did you find that training?
So when I was in China, when I studied Tai Chi, I studied both the Yang form and the Chun form, the two main family forms of Tai Chi. And I loved it, to be able to, so my Yang teacher I did at night in a basketball court right before curfew. And my Chun teacher I did in a courtyard at noon every day. So every day I had two different teachers of these two different forms. At first I thought, like, this is stupid. Why am I doing both at the same time? Then I realized a lot of people do a lot of things at the same time. And so I did it, and I was really glad that I did, because the two forms are really distinct. But there was something, interestingly, for me, Tai Chi. When you look at it, like when you see an old lady doing it in the park, for instance, or, you look at it and you think, "What the hell is that? That crazy dancing stuff?" But as a wrestler, and then later on as a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner. I found that the Tai Chi was even more relevant for those things than it was. I mean, it was unbelievably relevant. The ability to, when you move really slowly, your body, the synapses or something, learn how to deal with weight and change of geometry and all of that. And the one thing about Jiu-Jitsu and wrestling is that they're nothing else other than applied geometry. Every single thing you do is working on geometric form. And if you don't work with the laws of geometry, it's not going to work. You can't choke someone out without the right shape. You have to make the right shape.
Yeah.
And so it was all about shapes and form. And that's what Tai Chi is, all about shapes and form. And the human body, interestingly enough, I've come to believe, has ideal shapes. Certain things work best when you're in a certain position, whether you're on your back, on your knees, on your feet, or whatever, moving through space and moving. If you apply certain shape theory to your form, you're going to be more effective.
Yeah, definitely.
And I find that now as I'm working with a lot of boxing technique, that the Tai Chi, the foot, the postures of the feet, the balance of the weight in the legs, all of those things are essential. I mean, listen, Bruce Lee talks about that ad nauseum. So we know we have at least guys like him saying this. And it's not like I'm like coming up with some new theory on this stuff, but I had to find that out for myself. And I was really, surprised at how interesting something so slow, so subtle, and so soft could have hidden inside of it all the dynamics of a real fighting form.
Sure. And some people might not realize that Tai Chi was actually originated as a fighting form on the battlefield and in combat.
Yeah. It's just really slow. It's really slow Kung Fu, but it's Kung Fu nonetheless.
Now, how would you say Tai Chi and Qigong compare?
So Qigong is a little more static, because you're taking a movement cycle, and you're repeating it with your feet still, for the most part. And so you don't move around while you do it. So basically, if you look at Tai Chi and you see them doing one movement cycle, if you just loop that, like on Instagram, like some, what's that thing called when it makes it go over and over again, like that,
or a bounce or something.
Yeah, it's like a little loop. Yeah. And so qigong is like you take one movement out of the cycle and you just repeat it.
Yep.
So it is sort of the same thing. It's just much easier to learn because they're not linked forms. It's not like the complexity of a taiji form is due to the fact that you have to link one move to the next. Whereas qigong, it's like, do this one, now stop. Now put your feet this way. Now do this one, 10, 15 times and then stop. So it's like easier. They come in sets of like 8 or 10, so there's not that many. taiji forms can have 108 linked movements.
Wow.
That's a lot of stuff to memorize.
Yeah, definitely.
And they all fade into each other
too. I think
exactly.
I think qigong is, I guess you would say, simplified tai chi.
Yeah, I'd say that's an arguable and reasonable thing to say for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've trained a fair amount of qigong, a little bit of tai chi, and I see exactly what you're talking about.
Do you think it would be better to start with qigong and then go to tai chi?
Josh, what do you think about that? I'm not sure.
I think that might be useful depending on how organized your body is. So what I would say is this: for people who have no history of athleticism, then I think that qigong is a better starting point. If you've taken any other form, then when someone says, do what I'm doing, and you can actually mirror them. Like I was saying before, I'm kind of dyslexic, but if you don't have that kind of trouble, then I would say Taiji is a great way to start because you can just get right into that one.
All right.
You know? But either one, it just depends on what your learning style is. That's really, it's all contingent on that.
So now you wrote 3 books?
Well, translated.
You translated 3 books. How'd you get into doing that?
So the first, Tom Bizio, is a martial arts book. That one is it's the rudiments of Xingyi, but the Neigong that goes along with Xingyi. So it's a development of explosive power, how to root that power in the body and the channels and meridians or whatever. So it's like the hidden force within Xingyi. So that book is a study of those things, how the difference between an extraordinary practitioner and someone who's just memorized the outer form, Yeah. And so that book is like an assistant aid to someone who wants to do Xingyi with a little more force, power, and explosive sort of possibility. And then the other 2 books that I translated are Taoist scriptural books. So those are the books we use at the altar in the morning, the evening, and at the temples. So if you go to a temple and you see people with instruments and singing or chanting and making a lot of vocal noise, they're reading those books.
Right.
So in America, in English, I should say, those books weren't available, and now they are. So I wanted to do that because those are the fundamental daily texts of the temple system. So now
they weren't available at all prior to that.
No,
cool.
No, they weren't. Yeah. So now people have those, which is good.
Is it a tedious process translating the books from Chinese to English?
Yeah, it's exhausting.
I bet.
There's so much. The other thing is that you're not translating stuff like that's technical and obvious. It's really poetic, and there's double meanings in there. So as I'm translating, for a lot of it, I had to go and do a lot of research just to once you can translate the line, but to understand what it even means, though, took me outside of that text. I had to do a lot of corollary work to figure out what the hell is this guy talking, or these people talking about. So yeah, it was tough, but it was worth it because it's done.
Yeah.
So now,
any plans to translate any more?
Yeah, I'm working on one more book, and then after that, I think I'm going to write my own book, my own thing.
Yeah, that would be interesting. I'd definitely read it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Like an autobiography?
It might be in that vein. I was thinking, listen, I'm going to let you know a little secret. So what I want to do is I want to talk to Rizzo and do one with him. Because I think it would be cool to do a book with him talking talking about his Shaolin stuff and the hip hop scene, and me talking about hardcore and the Daoist stuff. So it'd be like an interesting, pack of stuff that would go together.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Yeah. But and interviews into the stories from the street in both senses and different things that would be really cool, I think. But, that's like a pipe dream.
Hey,
but I know people that know him and listen. Who knows? You never know.
Well, you've already made your other dreams come true, so why not keep it going?
I love that, Chris. Exactly.
You're living your dream.
That's the attitude.
You're an example of living your dream. You knew what you wanted to do, and you had some obstacles along the way, but you're living it. You're a living testament of that, and I respect that a lot.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, it feels like that. I feel really lucky to have, been able to be, tenacious and just stick with this stuff. Although a lot of, you get kicked off the track here and there, but, sounds like you've done the same. And I really love and respect your career, and the diversity of what you do musically is really unbelievable.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I was like, my son follows too, and he was like, he's doing country music.
Well, I love all genres. So, as an artist, I think you naturally just progress and want to experiment.
Yeah, no, it's great. I love it. It's awesome. Yeah.
Talk a little bit about your painting and calligraphy. I've seen some of your paintings online, and they're very good.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. So, my grandmother did painting, and she did forms like bamboo and flowers and butterflies and birds and all of that style. I stick to the calligraphy. I love just the black form of the word, and honestly, for me, before I did Chinese calligraphy, I'm interpreting my Chinese calligraphy through my history of doing graffiti.
Okay.
Graffiti is, what are we doing there? We've got the alphabet, and we're making. Look at what people have done for the last 40 years with the alphabet. Every city has the most extraordinary art all over the place, just based on the stupid alphabet. 26 letters.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
And everybody has interpreted those 26 letters in phenomenal ways. You know what I mean? And so back in the day, that was one of my forms, and I love the flow of. Listen, I love to put up the burner. I love, a lot of the color and everything. But there's something about, as a kid, as a young man, when that one day when you're sitting at your kitchen table with a notebook, or you're in history class working on your tag, and that flow finally looks the way you wished it would, and your hand can do it exactly the same every single time. That, for me, was the newly religious experience.
Wow, that was so, yeah, I like that, and I dig that what you just said.
So, that flow, that movement, that hand style, like that everybody has to achieve their own version, their own take on the writing their name. That you have to invent the name, to get to pick which letters we want in it. It's not the one our parents gave us; it's the one we picked because it has an E in it or a K. I love to write a K, whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so, that to me is where this was really born, was out of those forms. And so when I do Chinese calligraphy, I do the cursive style because for me, it's identical to tagging with a fat cap.
Wow.
It's like the brush can be thin, it can be fat, and it can flow in the same ways. And to me, it's essentially they're two parts of the same thing for me.
But definitely a good way of looking at it.
That's deep, man. You just brought a philosophical aspect to graffiti. I fucking dig it.
But so that's one of the things that basically I'm doing that on Chinese scrolls. I did one of the things that I got to do last year was I did some calligraphy for a Jim Jarmusch film, and Jim's good friends with RZA. But one of my calligraphy was in RZA's movie. So,
oh wow, nice.
Now I'm thinking about that. That might be.
What movie was that?
That was that crazy one. The Dead Don't Die.
Okay, I've heard of it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah,
I'll
it's nuts.
check
So
that out.
Tilda Swinton is like this ninja or something, and her dojo is. I designed the dojo and helped them do, and I did the calligraphy for it. So if you watch that movie, you'll see all those things in that room are mine. They rented them from me in Boston.
Wow,
oh, nice.
I'm gonna have to definitely check it out.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy. So it's good. It's fun.
How long does it take you to complete a piece of calligraphy?
I practice it 100 times and then write it the final time, and that's the one I sell.
Oh, cool. So it takes some patience.
Yeah. So I have to get the flow first. You know what I mean? Just like that tag in the notebook. Gotta get it right first. Yeah,
that's wild.
That is wild.
Yeah, that was actually fucking.
It's not just writing the letter and I'm done. It's like it's a lot of practice.
So it's a big process. 101.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little about Josh about maybe like modern day Taoism?
Yeah. So there's a lot of diversity in the Taoist world. Some people are just straight up crazy people because
they have those everywhere.
When you take a religion out of its home, and you interpret it, all kinds of things happen. And when people don't speak the language and they haven't been in the community, they're interpreting it from English-speaking books.
Yep.
And they're getting further and further and further away from the source.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of crazy out there, but there's also at this point right now, there's so much amazing stuff going on out there in terms of the books being written, the books being translated, the communities that are developing. You know, in the 90s, Taoism was still barely legal in China, let alone here.
Yeah.
Because of the Cultural Revolution, religion was really sort of subdued. That's a really friendly word for it. But, you know, it existed. There were always Taoists around. But they were really, like, reticent to talk to you or to communicate or to be religious. You know what I mean? They had to make sure it was, like, philosophical and martial arts. Those are the things that won't get me in jail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but nowadays, there's much more freedom. So when I go there, for instance, speaking of Taoism in the modern world, so when I take my community there, last year we were actually invited to what's the equivalent of the Vatican, it's called the CBA, the Chinese Daoist Association.
Yeah.
So at Baiyuan, White Cow Temple, which is the main headquarters of the Daoist religion in China, we got to meet. They invited us to meet with not the Pope, but the next guy down who's in charge of all international relations, and he was like, "Look, we've heard about you guys, and we really want to help you, and we want you to help us make it so that people who are interested in Taoism can get an authentic, actual training, so that they're not like lost." We get a lot of people coming to this country into the temples who are really weird. They said, like they're so confused and don't know what's going on. We really were looking for people like you to help us help your own people. So they've now given us their full support to have access to them and books and this and that, and the college itself, and we go there with our students so that we can help to build a more robust Taoist community in the West.
Yeah.
They really want to see a little higher quality when people show up, because they don't want the crazy. It's not good for them, So we're trying to actually help with that, with the development of that kind of authenticity.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
you lead people in the right direction.
Yeah.
One thing I've noticed with Taoism, and I think it's becoming more popular, but there's not, like, at least here, there's not as many, like, centers for it. Like, there's Buddhist temples everywhere, but I can't really, I think maybe in Boston there might be a Taoist center, but it doesn't seem to be as available.
No, it's so right. I mean,
30 years ago it wasn't even legal.
Right, I know. Well, in China.
Yeah. There in New York City, I can only think of 2 that are out in the open, at least. There might be little. So there are these. They're called tong. In Chinatown, there's like communities that come from the same town in China within a community here in the United States. They sort of stick together, and their businesses help each other. And it's just like my family when they came from the Ukraine. I mean, like they hooked up with my landscape right away.
Interesting fact.
So, it's very much like that. Legal or not, I don't know, but there's a variety of both of those, obviously. So in Chinatown, there's these very small family temple type of things, and those aren't really available for white people, though.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're not really available, literally. They're not even available for Chinese people who aren't from that village, so it doesn't matter. So, that's the thing that the Chinese Daoist Association wants us to help make a presence for people who are looking to be able to find something, because there's nothing to find. You go looking, you're not finding anything. So they want us to...
So that's part of your mission, you would say?
That's part of our mission, yeah. To make a landing field for people who are flying around looking for it.
And now, I know they've been intertwined in the past. How do you compare Taoism to Buddhism?
From the 900s on, my lineage of Taoism, which is the predominant lineage, is called Chuanzhen, a complete reality. And of that main sect, there's an offshoot called the Dragon Gate. That's my sect, is Dragon Gate. We're really pretty much, we envelop a lot of the Buddhist thought. So we're like a Buddhist Tao. The whole point of our lineage is that it includes Confucianism, Buddhism, and Taoism as a complete set of tools for realization. Yeah. So the differences, strictly speaking, are pretty minimal. Other than, notions of Buddhist nirvana don't exist in Taoism the way they do there. I don't know. It's kind of hard and technical to talk about the differences without getting like really weird into language and everything. But the differences are subtle. I'll say that. You know what I mean? But the biggest difference is that Taoism is Chinese, Buddhism is Indian, and in those two cultural spheres is where the biggest differences lie.
Yeah. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, too. Another thing is that I think in Taoism, it's all about like extending your life, living the longest life possible, and exercising, and that's where the Tai Chi comes in and everything else. And then kind of in Buddhism, it's more just like, existing and meditating, and they're not really focused on the physical aspect. Well, I shouldn't say all, but I read that somewhere.
No, you're right. You're right. To a great extent, that's true. And in increasingly more subtle terms to describe that, like that, we could go down that rabbit hole. But in the end, really, what you just said is to a great extent true. The aspirations of the Taoists is not to like end this life through nirvana at an early age. It's like to live long, to have realization, but not. It's like we don't. To not, in some ways, Buddhism is a little bit nihilistic, even though they say it's not. And so it's like their noble truths are based on the fact that life is suffering. In Taoism, we don't really say that life is suffering.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's not that pessimistic at its root. We actually enjoy a long life and want to enjoy a long life, so that our realizations are possible, and that we fulfill our destiny in terms of honoring our parents and grandparents and all that stuff. So it's interesting. There's a lot of nuance to that discussion that you bring up. The difference between the two is really, it's really a detailed discussion.
And isn't there documented Taoists that lived like over 100 years? There was one guy, he lived in like the mountains of China. He lived to like 125 or something like that.
Yeah, there's a lot of these sort of like ascetic, hermetic practitioners who are, they literally eat like pine seeds and, and pine pollen and stuff. I mean, it's crazy.
Beyond veganism.
Way beyond. Yeah, exactly. So they have these really humble diets and all of these practices that they do. And they try to live as simple a life as they can because they recognize anxiety and stress as detractor from lifespan. You know.
Yeah.
The more upset you are, the shorter your life is going to be.
Yeah, that stress is the number one killer, right?
Yeah.
But they basically have to separate themselves from society, much like a monk would, a Buddhist monk.
Yes, and to apply those types of practices, that really requires like some seclusion. For sure.
Have you gone on any journeys like that?
No, I haven't. You know, I'm like definitely like a householder practitioner. You know, I have 3 kids. Like I said, I've been with my wife since 1991, and and I work. You know what I mean? I have to work. I have a household to keep up, and so, you know, it's not in the cards for me to head off into seclusion like that. I wish, but not really.
So you're more of like the urban, modern day Daoist priest. That everyday man maybe can relate to a little bit more, or everyday human being, I should say. Yeah, you know, I think it's much easier to teach people who, from when they say, "Oh, I'm stressed about work," or, you know, broke, or you know, I can actually relate to that. You know, it's not like I'm some dude living in a hill, like with no understanding of their predicament. You know, the whole point is that I can relate to them and their needs when they say, "Oh, I'm having trouble meditating because my kids or my life or my work or my whatever." I can help them navigate that because I face the same difficulties. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, man, I dig that. You know, because some people might consider themselves to be holier than thou or something, or held on a pedestal because of their spiritual practice.
Yeah, that's not good.
Do you frequently meditate?
I do every day.
I try to as well. How long do you usually meditate for?
Oh, sometimes 15 minutes. You know what I mean? I try to be realistic. I can't put in the hard work every day.
Yeah.
But, you know, an hour is best, but, you know, half an hour, 15 minutes generally.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I try to do at least like a half an hour, but sometimes it'll be less. But and then I'll have periods where I'm like, all right, I'm going to go for an hour. And I think it's essential, man, to keep your mind clear.
Definitely. And the thing is that it's the discipline that counts the most. It's not the time you put down. It's really just putting it down at all.
Word.
That's the key. You know.
Word. Yeah, man. Definitely.
And people definitely get like discouraged. Like, oh, I'm only doing. But I'm like, are you doing it every day? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's the hardest part. Forget about how long you're doing it. You can actually sit down every day. You've already conquered this thing. The rest is going to happen.
Yeah. It's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Now going back a little bit, switching topics real quick. I know you were into the hardcore scene, the punk scene back in New York City, and what are some of your earliest memories of that? Because we both relate on that level, and some of your favorite bands and shows.
So my earliest memories would be the parks, Washington Square and Tompkins Square. I mean, that was beyond the shows. It was the street that was really where, I don't know. And those neighborhoods, man, like the East Village back in those days, once you got past First Avenue, it was crazy. You know, like the people today have absolutely no idea what New York was like in the 80s. They have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, you can read all these guys have put out their books, you know what I mean? Like the great books, like Roger's book. And
John Joseph
and the other guy.
Yeah. We don't have to get into that.
Yeah. But, you know, so you can get an idea. But it was really that crazy. It was that awesome. It was that amazing. Like the whole world was open. And people weren't worried about what brands they were wearing. And people would show up with crazy shit. You know what I mean? Like it was just wide open. And we had our own universe. Like there was no internet. There was numbers you could call, like these 800 numbers, to find out what the shows were, what shows were happening within a 100-mile radius.
Wow.
It was like a recorded message. We'd call it up. It'd be like, in New Rochelle, Murphy's Law is playing at 7 o'clock. You know, like really just a list of everything that was happening.
That's dope.
Or it was flyers. You know, like you go and you find a telephone pole, which was this flyer last week, the next week. You know what I mean? Like it was, and the flyers were awesome, by the way. Nowadays, it's like so high tech and internety and like lots of graphics.
Yeah.
Hand drawn, People would use their own hand style or graffiti style to make their flyer or whatever it was, little characters on there. The whole thing was an art form all in itself. My friend did a book, Urban Styles, on that whole issue of flyers and graffiti and everything in the hardcore scene.
Yeah, I think I've heard of that book. Yeah.
Yeah. Ezek is in there, and Gia, both of them right now.
Yep.
And Steve Huey is in the latest version of it as a tattoo artist, same ilk. But those are all, that's just like, those days were great. So we'd be out on the street. There were kids with cameras, documenting it. And because back then there were no phones, there were no cell phones, there were no, it was just, you had to put yourself on the street to find out what was going on. You didn't call your friends because their mother would, who knows who would answer the phone? Nobody knew where anybody was. So you would go and we would, everybody's going to, you would check a few places, right? You'd go to the big cube on Astor Place. Wait to see that big metal cube. Is anybody here? Oh, no. You'd see one kid walking. Where is everybody? Oh, they're over there at the, the Cherry Cliff or whatever. I don't know, whatever bar, whatever thing. And it was all like just the word on the street and the feet on the street. There was nothing else. We didn't have to worry about stupid gangster talk on the internet. Some dipshit saying something who didn't know who. It was all solved right in real time. Any shit that happened, it was solved right there. It was either talked out or banged out. It was easy. You know what I mean? And it was done. And so I think it was the most amazing thing. And as far as the bands are concerned, I mean, my favorite show that I ever saw. I mean, when Underdog would play or Sick of It All, I love those two. I don't know. There's too much. Murphy's Law was so fun. I mean, Jimmy was nuts. He's as nuts now as he was then, but then he was crazier. So it was great. All those guys, all of them were amazing. Every single one of them. It was just, those were unbelievable days, man. And it was our secret. Nobody knew what we were doing. No one knew what we were doing. They didn't write articles. I mean, my friends were on the Geraldo show when he got his nose broke.
Right.
Because I was in Sharp at the time as well. Nobody knew what we were up to. There were rumors about the scene. Everybody knew that there was that punk existed or hardcore existed, but what did we do? What was it like inside there? I had no idea. They didn't understand that we actually. They would show a video on the news of like the pit. You know what I mean? And they'd be like, "These kids are killing each other." Meanwhile, they forgot to show the part where anybody who fell down got picked up. You know what I mean? Right.
Well, the media always focuses on the negative, just like with the skinhead culture.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know all about that. But it was really just a totally. We were all in it together, and it was amazing. And I can't say enough good stuff about it. I mean, it was crazy for sure.
Yeah.
And I've seen some horrible things.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
But at the same time, those are all really important, memories and parts of my life.
Yeah, and I think it's something that you have to live to really understand it. Yeah,
for sure. Exactly. You can't get the real texture and flavor by reading about it, and you have to steep yourself in it. We were steeped. I mean, I'm telling you, it was every single, once the weekend came, that's all it was.
Yeah.
24
that was hours.
It. 24 hours. Yep.
Yeah. And another interesting thing too is all of the different, like yourself, like people that were in that scene that branched out into other areas of life and careers, and it's just so diverse, man. And I know so many people that do so many great things that came from that scene.
Oh, I know. Yeah, totally. I'm always like so proud of the acceptance. It's not like back then we were all of a certain demeanor, you know what I mean? But you don't have to be a tough guy to be respected by your peers from those days. They're not looking for you to be some badass, whatever, what the fuck. bar, and everybody's like, we understand we had that history together. So it's like, it's a very, we're all proud of each other, you know what I mean? And it's just amazing to see the people who stuck with it, whether, you know, the ones in the bands in particular. They had to. That's their art form. You know what I mean?
Indeed.
And they've perfected it too. You know what I mean? Like, you know, Roger and Jimmy, these guys have perfected the art form.
Masters,
man, you know,
of the craft.
Masters. And Freddie. I mean, these guys are just unreal.
That's what they do.
That's what they do.
Yeah. Just like what you do with Taoism,
yeah.
they do a hardcore punk rock.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful. I mean, these guys are they're the peak of the form, you know?
Amen to that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Josh, how have you been making out in New York with all this pandemic bullshit since March?
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know, I'm sick of this, man. My kids are at home. They're not going to school. It's like...
Oh, really? How old are your kids?
Yeah. I've got 17, 13, and 8.
Really? No school at all, huh?
No.
Just online?
Yeah, just online.
Oh, shit.
And it's grueling, you know?
Have you guys been working still or no?
I'm working, yeah.
Oh,
but New York right now is doing well. And luckily, we're not like Iowa or whatever. Like those people, it's like a zombie apocalypse.
Well, I remember when it first started. We talked about this before. Like downtown was like a ghost town. There's nobody on the street. Like Times Square, there was nobody. I never even seen a picture of New York like that. Really,
no.
Yeah. There was not one car, not one person on the sidewalk.
No, man. I said this before. I was out in the Bronx, I think in July, and also went down into the city, and it was not what I was used to.
Yeah, no, man, it's weird. You know, when they shoot a movie and they need that to be empty, they can't do it. They have to do it with computers. And there's never a time when Times Square was empty, ever, not a single time. And
that's
now,
crazy.
Like in real life, with no Photoshop, no computer, you know, the place was desolate. I mean, that was shock. When I saw those pictures, I was like, that sent chills up my spine. I was like, this is like I am legend right now.
Yeah,
this is crazy.
It looked like a movie.
It did. Yeah. There's nothing weirder than New York City standing still. You know, the only time as a New Yorker, the only time we get that is when there's a big snowstorm.
Yep.
That's like, it's quiet as no one out there. The only other time I've ever experienced that in my life was 9/11, in the days right after it.
Yeah.
That city, we were all like in shock after that. It was a weird time. But like, no one talked on the street. It was really, the whole city was snowing. It was really crazy. But other than that, you know, snowstorms and 9/11, that was it. You know, the city I've never seen it.
And even then, it wasn't even as dead. I don't think.
Right. Even then. Exactly.
Well, now we're still in the grips of this pandemic, and New York was one of the hardest hit places. So I'm all the best to anyone living out there. You know, I know a lot of people have fled. They're saying people are leaving their condos and apartments and moving out of the New York, and prices are dropping and all this craziness.
Yeah. It's crazy. You know, upstate is getting nuts because everybody's leaving the city. They're all coming up here.
Yeah.
And they're literally buying everything, anything. The prices up here are going up like crazy. I wish I could move. I can't afford it.
It's happening. It's happening here too. A lot of people are going out to if they had beach properties and things like that, going out to Newport and just buying. I know a girl that does real estate out there, and she's actually, it's booming out there for her. She said,
"Yeah, crazy.
It is. It's insane."
Where, Newport?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. So, Josh, you want to give out your social media, your website, where people can contact you, get more information about Taoism and what you're doing and everything else?
Yep. My website is joshpaynter.com, PAYNTER.com. If you just Google, I don't even, honestly, I don't know my Pardon Clouds website, my Taoist temple. But if you just type in Pardon Clouds Taoism, you'll find us.
Pardon Clouds Taoism.
Yeah, just Google that.
Okay.
And then my Instagram, if you want to see my calligraphy and stuff, is just Josh Paynter.
Okay.
Yeah, guys, spelling on that is Josh, JOSHPAYNTER. That's his Instagram, and Josh Paynter, seedy.com.
That's right. So make sure you follow him. Check out the website. He got the translations out. Check out his calligraphy. And you said you were doing like online classes too, right? For the Taoism?
Yeah.
Cool. So anyone that's interested.
They can just contact me through Carbon Clouds and we'll be in contact.
Yeah, for sure. Keep up to date on the website, his Instagram. He's got another book coming out. Any shout outs you want to give, Josh?
I think I've already done a few here.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Man. Well, we appreciate you coming down.
Yeah, Josh, that was great, man. That was a great insight into the world of Taoism and your journey.
Absolutely.
And I hope you do write that book because I definitely want to read it.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, guys.
Of course, man. That was great. So everyone check out Josh Paynter. Josh, we'll talk to you soon. We'll definitely promote anything that you got going on. And, we'll be in touch.
Absolutely, Bert. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
All
right, Josh. Thank you.
Bye.
That's right, guys. Street Corner Soapbox. We're fucking out of here.
Follow us on Instagram at street_corner_soapbox.
Don't forget, guys, check us out. Like us on Facebook at Street Corner Soapbox.
And subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, Stitcher,
and all digital platforms. Don't forget, all of our episodes are going to be on streetcornersoapbox.com. Love you all.